All right, welcome back for part two of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. X and KB coming at you as we always do on a weekly basis. Thank you to all of our viewers, all of our listeners, however you're watching us, however you get your podcast. We appreciate it. Well, the NFL Hall of Fame, as we spoke about there at the end of part one, congratulations to all five of those Hall of Famers on getting in. That would be Larry Fitzgerald and Drew Brees on the first ballot. I believe that this is, the third or fourth ballot for Adam Vinatieri, KB?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and more than deserving of getting into the Hall of Fame. Roger Craig, congratulations, and also congratulations to Luke Kuechly. But our next guest that we have on the show, he does not believe that Luke Kuechly should have gotten in this time around, most notably in favor of another player. And he's been on the show before, and he's my brother from another. He's wrong on this side of the argument, as y'all are gonna find out in just a moment. But love him all the same. Welcome Lawrence Vaughn back to the show. Law, what's going on, bro? You have a bone to pick with Luke Kuechly going into the Hall of Fame over a particular Dallas Cowboys great.
Yeah, appreciate y'all for having me on. Always great to be on here with y'all. I would say that it's not personal with Luke Kuechly, but I feel like Darren Woodson has more than deserved to be in the Hall by now. So the same point that the writer, the voter who kept out Bill Belichick said, like, oh, I voted for these people because I felt like if I didn't vote for them now, they weren't going to get there. Like, they weren't going to get in pretty much. And to me, that's just kind of where we are right now with Darren Woodson, where it's kind of like, I feel like there are guys in the Hall who should have been taking a back seat to Darren. And this class right now, as great as they were, I feel like they're in that same category of like, you should be taking a backseat to Darren Woodson. I mean, we're talking about one of the most underrated, under-respected defensive backs at a modern era. He really built how the modern safety is played, and it shows how truly devalued the 90 safeties were.
Look, I'm not disagreeing with Darren Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame. I agree that he should have been in a long time ago. But I'm not going to take away what Luke Kuechly getting into the Hall of Fame does. So Luke Kuechly played 8 seasons in the league. So I just want to read this off for you. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year in year 2, 5-time first team All-Pro, 2-time second team All-Pro, 3-time Butkus Award winner. The best award that you can get as a linebacker in the NFL individually. In an 8-year span, he accomplished all of that. That, in my opinion, is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now, there once was a time that we would look at the Hall of Fame and we'd say somebody who had more longevity should be more deserving of that. They officially eliminated that when they put Calvin Johnson in the Hall of Fame on his first ballot. And that's a big reason why I don't have an issue with guys like Luke Kuechly and Patrick Willis going in so early in their tenure and their eligibility to be Hall of Famers. Is this Luke's first or second time around, KB?
Second year eligibility.
Okay, so he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, but if he had been a first ballot Hall of Famer, I honestly wouldn't have had an issue with it, to be quite honest with you, because I just look at his total body of work, and there was about a 3, 4, maybe 5-year stretch. Would both of you agree with this, where you would say Luke Kuechly was the best overall linebacker in the NFL?
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
I think also when we factor in all of this stuff, like, yes, he had an 8-year career, but I look at peak of your powers. How great were you? Because honestly, Luke Kuechly was so good that he could have entered into, greatest linebacker possibly of the modern era. Like, that's how good he was and how dominant he was. If it weren't for the injuries and he had played out the rest of his career, we don't know how long he would have played, but just say that he had played longer than the 8-year stretch. Could we have ventured into a conversation possibly with just everything that you know of the player that he was, that he could have entered into that type of conversation? Because he was amazing. Like, from the time that he stepped foot in Carolina,
we already knew you had the game plan for him. Him, Thomas Davis, they solidified that defense. We knew that they were going to be a problem. And I guess more so, I look at Luke Kuechly a little different because he destroyed my Falcons on a number of games, like throughout the years. I look at him like he made it to a point where I was like, man, we got to play the Panthers. I don't care if they got the worst record in the league. We know he's going to be a problem no matter what. You got a game plan for him. You have to scout him specifically because he's a game record. I looked at it like, Law, I definitely agree with you. I do think that, Darren Woodson, he definitely has he definitely has his case to get in. I just look at it like we were just talking about it before we ended part one, that I don't want to say it like that this guy should have got in and this guy shouldn't have got in. They both actually have great cases to get in. It's just a shame that somebody had to, go in and someone had to be left out, because Darren Woodson was one of the baddest safeties games ever seen. And so it's just really unfortunate more than anything that he was not selected to go into the Hall this year. But I would hopefully, that he would get in next year. But that's just, it's just an unfortunate situation.
So let me tell you what I believe the real issue is here at hand as to why Darren Woodson has not been elected to the Hall of Fame yet. And this should not be held against him because he accomplished what he accomplished. Like Lawrence said, he modernized the safety position, or he helped modernize the safety position to where it is today. I look at 3 to 4 other safeties in his era: Steve Atwater, John Lynch, Leroy Butler, and the last few great years of Ronnie Lott. I don't know if he was ever on their level. And you know that those voters, you know that they are comparing what he did in that era compared to what they did in that era. I don't know if he was ever at a Steve Atwater's level. I don't know if he was at Leroy Butler's level. I don't know if he was at John Lynch's level. I don't know if he was at Ronnie Lott's level at any point in his career, because in my mind, I think Ronnie Lott's the greatest safety to ever play football. And it's going to take a lot to change my mind on that. Just for the simple fact that Ronnie Lott was a part of a 49ers draft class that basically helped build the 49ers dynasty of the 1980s. So, yes, Darren Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame, but we already know how these voters are looking at this. To me, Lawrence, it's like the Drew Pearson effect. How do I compare you up to where you were with the other guys of your era that played your position? And it shouldn't necessarily be like that, but that's one of the ways that I believe they could be looking at it.
For sure. And I can see that point. However, if we look at Darren Woodson's stats, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 5-time Pro Bowl, 4-time All-Pro, which 3 of those 4 times he was first team. He's on the 1990s All-Decade team. And that alone, how many studs are in the Hall of Fame from the 1990s? He on the All-Decade team. He got over 1,300 career tackles, which is honestly unheard of for a safety. 23 interceptions, 11 sacks. He was what Cam Chancellor and Troy Polamalu were 20 years before they ever were. He just didn't have the benefit of the hype that comes around with being a modernized safety of, I could cover tight ends, I could cover wide receivers, I can hit like linebacker, or I can like cover as the best safety. Best DB. And it's kind of like you mentioned, Drew Pearson. It's almost like, unless you was 1-on-1 as a Dallas Cowboy, we gonna hit you with attacks. And when we hit you with that tax, you have to pray that the next class coming up behind you don't have studs on it, because then we'll hold you back even further. And it's just getting to the point where it's just kind of like, I just asked this to another group chat I'm in. If he's not getting in these classes, then when will he? When could you make the argument? Because just like how Bill Belichick didn't get in and Robert Kraft didn't get in, the voters are trying to set the precedent now that, yeah, we're going to pass up on Tom Brady that first time too. So Tom Brady getting passed up. how can we have any hope that Darren's going to get in?
Well, we know that Tom Brady's not going to end up getting passed up. That's one thing we can go ahead and we can put into perspective. I know that the voters did what they did to Belichick and they did to Kraft. I don't see them doing that to Tom Brady. I just don't see it happening like that. The four safeties that I named to you, though, Leroy Butler, Steve Atwater, John Lynch, and Ronnie Lott, they're all in the Hall of Fame. So that's why I named off those names in particular. Because there are other names that you could have rattled off, like Carnell Lake, Rodney Harrison. They were great safeties in their day. They're not in the Hall of Fame. I do believe that Darren Woodson was a better player than those guys, too. But like I said, I think it's the Drew Pearson effect, man. I think there is going to come a time where he is going to get elected into the Hall of Fame. My biggest wish, though, is that when that day does happen, number one, that he's still here physically on the earth to be able to be a part of the moment. And number two, he's still of age to be able to enjoy the moment. Because we've seen so many times that these guys will get elected into the Hall of Fame. Guys who played in the 50s and the 60s and the early 70s, and they're old and brittle now. And they can barely even go up there and give a speech on their own now to talk about their big moment. So hopefully that's not what ends up happening. And I don't believe that that's what's going to end up happening to Darren Woodson. I do believe that at some point within the next 5 years, he will get in the Hall of Fame. And it's going to happen probably over a person who people will make the argument should get in the Hall of Fame that particular year over him. Because the year that Drew Pearson finally did get in, Reggie Wayne was up for eligibility. And you can make the argument that Reggie Wayne's career, he has better numbers than Drew Pearson. But is that because of the era that he played in? It's so many different questions that you have about this entire thing.
Yeah. And I would just like ask both of you, given that Troy Polamalu's in the Hall, was Darren not a better safety than him? Not necessarily saying, oh, like he Darren deserves it more than you, because I believe Troy's a Hall of Famer as well. But just looking at like year by year, class by class, what takes up, Darren's had to watch other players that I feel like at his peak and at their peak, Darren was better than. And the fact that X, with the safety that you named, that Darren's even in the conversation with them, to me, that's like, dog, he's in. Not to mention all the other players from the 1990s, all decade teams, they're all in the Hall. Darren's the only one that isn't in the Hall from the 1990s all decade team.
KB, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and go first on this one because it's one of two ways I could go with that entire question that Lawrence just posed.
Yeah, I mean, y'all both make really good points. I'm trying to think about that one. I got to think about that a little bit more because that's really a tough. So, Law, make that argument again. So, what are you trying to like? Because he's on that all decade team, and because that the other members from that class are in. Because are you saying that Troy Polamalu he should have got in before him?
Yeah. I feel like he should have got in before Troy. Kind of like I feel Darren made the mold, or as X put it, helped make the mold for what we then became to learn was the modern day safety. So kind of like, how are you not paying respect to the originator? But these other people, like, and I'm not saying these are the only reason why like a Troy Polamalu got in, but the hype around them at that time, where I remember where it would be Chris Collinsworth calling Pittsburgh game like, oh, Troy can do it all. He can do it. But then didn't have the benefit of commentators at that time. And although the internet wasn't what it is today, there's a little bit of it back then to where it's kind of like they benefit more from a broader reach of the game today more than Darren had when he was playing.
Okay, so I got to hit time out on this before KB answers it because that's not completely true. Darren Woodson played on the Cowboys during a time where they were always on Fox and the commentators were John Madden and Pat Summerall. Dallas literally was the face of NFL on Fox for a good stretch of his time with the Dallas Cowboys. Could they have possibly played his name up more? Yes, but to say that he didn't have access to that, nah, he had the A team in Summerall and Madden and the access that Jerry had with the NFL being on Fox.
True. I'm not saying that, but here's an example. And my fault, KB.
No, you go ahead.
When people look back to those 90s Cowboys, they say it was Dion and the triplets. Is that like common? They look Dion and the triplets. A lot of people look at it that way, and Dion came in, and Dion was the star of that defense. Darren was there all 3 years. Darren held it down back there as well. It's kind of like we had so many stars on the Dallas teams that the ones from day one kind of get forgotten about.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. When you say people say that, are these casuals? Are these people on TV? Or are these actual players who were out there playing?
Well, it's not players, because if you leave it to players will say Darren should have been in from the jump. Like, now players will tell you Darren Woodson should already be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, even outside of that, though, players also tell you that the heart and soul of that defense was actually Charles Haley.
True. But to your point about casuals, I feel like casuals are some of the people that are voting nowadays.
That is very true, and there is a change that needs to be made to that. I agree with that
100%. For sure. And that's just my overall idea. I'm not saying that a Luke or a Drew Brees or none of these people shouldn't be in the Hall. I'm just saying that more than likely, the way that we are going about it, about accepting dudes into the Hall, is flawed in itself.
It's a flawed system overall. Like,
for sure. That's my gripe.
If you have a casual fan who maybe not like have appreciated everything, because like I said, there's certain things that don't show up stat wise that we can always go and look at it. Like, certain guys just had that it factor. Some guys had the fear factor. Certain guys just, you had, like, opposing players had to be aware of that player. See, the reason why I can't really give I can't really speak too much onto the I can speak on the Troy Polamalu part because I watched him for pretty much his whole career. Troy Polamalu was definitively the leader of that defense. On the back end, he was the leader of that defense on a defense that had a lot of, stout names. He was in that era, different eras for sure, but he was in that era where he was synonymous with guys like Ed Reed, Brian Dawkins. Those were his competition. John Lynch came, he was towards the end, so that was more so 90s going to early 2000s. But every year, Polamalu was in conversation for either the best or second best or even third best if you thought, Dawkins had it in certain years. He was like that guy that was a safety, but more he could come up and hit you like a linebacker. He was that guy. He was the heart and soul. He was on, commercials. So he did have that reach. I will say that he did have that reach. Now, Darren Woodson being with the Cowboys, I agree. He also had that reach. They were pretty much neck and neck, I say, as far as even in the era that we have now, he still had that. He still was getting that exposure to where, even a casual fan could appreciate a guy like Darren Woodson. In his era, can you say definitively, and this ain't a rhetorical question, I'm just asking both of y'all, he was the best at his position definitively throughout his era?
And that's the part of where I'm like, I don't know. Maybe in terms of just contributing to team success, you would say yes. Because he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He was there for all 3 years of that Cowboys dynasty run in the 90s. But I want to go back to Lawrence's part really quickly about Troy Polamalu and Darren Woodson. And this is actually why I wanted KB to go first. And I'm glad you cleaned that up when you said on the back end of that defense. Because two ways that you could go about this. Yes, both of those guys could be considered the heart and soul of their defense, but there's also been an argument made that James Harrison was the heart and soul of the Steelers defense as well. When it comes to those Cowboys teams, Charles Haley, there's an argument that he was the heart and soul of that defense. Lawrence, I don't think there's a case that can be made that Deion Sanders was ever the heart and soul of the Dallas Cowboys defense per se, because he was only there for 1 year of a Super Bowl run that they had. He was there for multiple seasons, but only one championship that they won. He was the flashiest name. He was the biggest name. He was the biggest superstar name. But I got to show the respect there to Darren Woodson and Charles Haley on that. But I'm going to actually give Charles Haley the edge in terms of being the heart and soul of that defense. Because when things unraveled with the Cowboys and Charles Haley, that defense was never the same again.
I agree.
I mean, but once again, to your point, Darren Woodson should have already been in the Hall of Fame. I will not disagree with that in any way whatsoever. There have been years that, and KB and I, we spoke about this in part one. There have been years that certain guys have been in the Hall of Fame, because we mainly touched on this with Roger Craig, because there are a lot of folks on the internet today saying Roger Craig was a great player, but he's not a Hall of Famer. No, I'm not going to do that to that man. There have been years that Roger Craig should have been elected into the Hall of Fame over players that did get elected into the Hall of Fame. Now, I'm not going to name any of those players' names because I don't want to throw any disrespect on any of those guys that went out there and laid it out there on the gridiron in ways that I would not have been able to do it. So I'm not going to name any names. I'm just happy and appreciative of the fact that the guy finally did get into the Hall of Fame, because he was a true difference maker during that 49ers dynasty in the 1980s. Without Roger Craig, they probably are missing one or two of those championships that they won during that decade. But like I said, I think that within the next 5 years, I think Darren Woodson does get in at some point, because you can't continue to deny what was out there on that field when he was out there. And not to mention, he was the last member of that Cowboys dynasty that was there all the way through who was standing. He was the last one standing, period. He was there longer than Emmett was. He was there longer than Troy was. He was there longer than Michael Irvin was. Deion, Charles Haley, Nate Newton. You can go down the list of all these guys. He was there for the longest. Darren Woodson was there for the Bill Parcells era. That's when his career came to an end, as they were going into the Bill Parcells era. But I don't know if I can definitively say that at any point Darren Woodson was the best safety of his era. And that's kind of where you kind of lose me a little in that argument, just in terms of that, because there's at least 1 or 2 years that I can say Troy Polamalu was the best safety of his era. Now, not too many, because Ed Reed, no doubt about it, was the number one safety of that era. And I'm saying that as somebody who is a Steelers fan. But I don't know if there was ever a year you could say that definitively about Darren Woodson.
So to your point, X, about him getting in the next 5 years, do you think he gets in next year? Because I think they announced the class. But again, like, you got dudes who have been pushed back. So it's going to be, you got to get another highly competitive class.
So here's the problem. 2 of those names, if not 3 of them on that list, I know for a fact are probably going to be first ballot. The 2 that I'm thinking of, Rob Gronkowski, Ben Roethlisberger, because we know they just got different rules for different quarterbacks. The 3rd one is Adrian Peterson. And while he should no doubt be a first ballot Hall of Famer with what he did on the field, you have to wonder, because of stuff that we saw calculated in there with Terrell Owens at least, are you going to factor in any of this off the field stuff? And Tito wasn't a problem child off the field. He didn't do anything criminally wrong or anything. But Adrian Peterson, with the child abuse allegations and different things like that, are they going to factor that in? Because the Hall of Fame, the voters, they ended this precedent of, no, it's only about what you did on the field. No, when you didn't put T.O. in on the first ballot, you ended that precedent and you made it about more than that.
I really hope and pray that they don't factor that in because there's no way that you can make like if we're just talking about on the field with Adrian Peterson, you cannot make the case that he shouldn't be first ballot. I don't care what the situation is. I know about the child abuse allegations. I know he's had a real kind of fall from grace since retiring, but yeah, no, you at least to me, someone who watched the game, someone who saw Adrian Peterson at Oklahoma, saw him in the league in Minnesota where they legit had no like they had years where they had no pass game whatsoever. Like I've seen him win a playoff game just on the ground. I've seen him come back quicker from an ACL injury than anybody ever. You're not going to tell me, you're not going to sit in my face and tell me that he does not deserve to be first ballot. Like he won an NFL MVP in what a lot of people call a quarterback driven league at the time. Hey, you can make a case. I listen. Don't mean I'm gonna like it. Don't mean I'm gonna understand it. Adrian Peterson, one of the baddest running backs I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I'm pretty sure y'all's lifetime as well. Like, I cannot make that case that he shouldn't get in first ballot. I'm sorry. I just had to chime in on that real quick.
I'm glad you said that though, KB, because there's another person up there who is he's a first ballot nominee as well. And what he did on the field, no doubt on the field production, he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer too. But the off the field stuff, you can't tell me that it's not going to factor in. And that would be Antonio Brown.
I think that might be where they draw the line. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna be honest. I think they draw the line at Antonio simply because it seemed, and it kind of happened before he retired, like in his Tampa Bay years, that and even when he was with the Raiders for that short stint, he is making it a mission to piss off as many people as possible because he just didn't care. And now, kind of like, there's so many off the field things in his retirement. Like, he just got cleared of that gun charge where if you see the video, you could have easily said, like, yeah, you're guilty because, like, you're going to have to do some time for this. I think that's going to kind of factor into you're not going to make it this first time, bro.
I'm with you, Law. I'm serious. Like, he might be one of the only people I can say they're going to factor everything in. Like, there's no way. I mean, and I hate that because at peak of his powers, he had one of the greatest peaks in NFL history from the wide receiver standpoint. Like, but you can't ignore what he did in his stint with the Raiders, his exit from the Bucks. That can't be ignored. Like, everything because like when I talk about Antonio Brown, there's no way you can talk about Antonio Brown and just strictly talk about on the field. Because everything that came along with that man. He was box office to watch. Especially from where he started from, like where he was drafted from to where he ended up. He had a Hall of Fame career, even if you just want to factor into Pittsburgh years. He had a Hall of Fame career just from the Pittsburgh years. Then he goes and solidifies it with a championship with the Bucks. But it's just like we can't ignore all of the stuff, like, calling the team owner a racial slur. You can't ignore stuff like that. Like it's stuff like that. The gun charge, the lawsuits that came along with, I think it was his assistant or something like that. You just can't ignore some of that stuff. Now, I do think they'll make an example out of him because it's almost like we know Antonio Brown is amazing on the field. But that man has done some irreversible damage to his legacy that I don't think anybody can help.
And also, I feel like if they did let him in on the first ballot, that's disrespectful to a guy like T.O., who didn't do half the stuff he did, but you made him pay the consequence. And on the flip side of that, I feel like it opens the gate to be like, A guy like Chad Ochocinco has a valid case now. Dez Bryant got a valid case now. We don't let Antonio Brown in, and like you just said, KB, like all his antics. Chad Ochocinco, I think one of the funniest things Chad Ochocinco did was when he wore that future Hall of Famer jacket on the sideline. At that moment, that's when you start to hear, like, yeah, bro, you're not getting in. Like, you'll never get in now. So if they let Antonio Brown in on the first ballot, it's like, hold on now. We got to go back. We got to go back and look at some of these other guys.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just give y'all my quick thoughts on this, and then I'm gonna come back around and I'm gonna answer the question that you initially asked, Law. I think Antonio Brown's going to be one of those guys who they either don't ever let in the Hall of Fame. He'll probably end up being the greatest statistical player who doesn't get into the Hall of Fame, or they wait until he's no longer physically on the earth and they put him in the Hall of Fame. I don't see them allowing him to come up there to actually enjoy his moment. I don't see that happening in any way whatsoever. And that's shameful, but he brought that upon himself with all the stuff that happened off the field. To answer your question initially, though, I think this all really depends on how many guys do they want to put in on the first ballot versus who's going to be the special contributor that they put in. Because there's no way they're making Bill Belichick wait another year. So Belichick has to go in next year. Does Kraft also go in next year too, or do they wait until 2028 and put Kraft and Brady in together? We'll see how they do that. There's at least one old timer, though, and I hate to call Darren Woodson an old timer, but the 1990s was 30 years ago now at this point. They always let at least one person from back in the day in. And he could be that person from back in the day who does get in next year. And honestly, I hope it does happen because it's very long overdue. He should have been in the Hall of Fame years ago. But I can't take away the moment from the five guys who did get in. Not with the body of work that they put out there on the field. But I do understand what you mean just in terms of Darren Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame. And there were some names that came out on that ballot as first-time nominees for next year. Look, they had nice careers, but those names honestly were put up there for shits and giggles. And I'm not going to go into who those names were, but we know for a fact that some of those names are not going to get into the Hall of Fame. Hey, listen, man, we want to thank Lawrence for coming on and joining us for this segment of the show. It's not the last time y'all are going to hear from him. He'll be back soon, especially as we continue to get more into the heart of the NBA season. And Law, we talked about it in part one, man. And I told KB, I'm hopeful that Luke Kennard can come and be a great contributor for the Lakers, because we've seen these sharpshooting role players come to the Lakers over the past few years, and they forget how to play basketball. They forget how to put the ball in the basket.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to when they had brought in Jody Meeks, it's just kind of like dudes will be setting the league on fire before they get to the LA. And then they get to I mean, and it's not even LA, it's the Lakers, because dudes have gone to the Clippers and been able to shoot just fine. And they get to the Lakers and it's like, oh snap, now he can't shoot. And you become a liability. And it's just kind of like, oh, I don't know what it is. Hopefully, but Luke Kennard right now, he's shooting 45% from three. So I mean, even if he were to take a dip, he'd still be the best, he'd still be the best shooter on the team.
Yeah, that's saying something too, right, about some issues that have to be addressed in the offseason. But we appreciate Lawrence coming on and joining us. He'll be back again soon. Law, we appreciate you, bro.
For sure. Appreciate y'all for having me.
All right, KB, there is a big game that is happening on Sunday, and that would be Super Bowl 60 between the New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks. It's a rematch 11 years in the making. Man, it's hard to believe that we're just a little more than 48 hours away from the conclusion of this NFL season. It came fast and it went away fast too. But the more that we've gone on and we've talked about this, I'm feeling like we're going to get more of a competitive game than I initially thought we were going to get. For the simple fact that the Patriots have a lot of first-time players that are playing in this game, But I think you have to factor in that this is Mike Vrabel's 4th Super Bowl. He won 3 as a player. Ironically enough, with the Patriots, it's his first time going as a head coach, but 4th overall trip. This is Josh McDaniels' 10th Super Bowl that he's going to be coaching in. And you have to just know that they honestly might have the leg up in terms of preparation, mental preparation, when it comes down to having those guys ready to go for the game. Now, that doesn't win the game out there in between the lines, but I think it does at least give them a chance for this to be a much more competitive game than some folks think it's going to be.
Yeah, you can't, like I said, you can't buy experience. You can't buy what it's like to have to be able to prepare for someone who's already been in that moment. Like I said, Patriots offense to me hasn't been really impressive this postseason. But if anybody knows what it's like to prepare for a big game, it's Josh McDaniels. Having someone like that on your staff definitely gives you a leg up, especially against first-year head coach Mike McDonald, who honestly, he's been in big games before, but this is going to be the biggest game of his career as well. Mike Vrabel has, while he hasn't been in it as a head coach, he has been in, like you said, as a player. So he's seen what it takes and what the mindset has to be going, not just from the week of the Super Bowl, the night before the Super Bowl, the day of the Super Bowl. It all has to come together. Like I said, it's gonna. I do feel like that the experience level will factor in, but honestly, this is gonna be one of those Super Bowls that it's gonna be. It's gonna be, like I said, it's gonna be competitive. It's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna be a back and forth game. To be honest with you, because throughout the postseason, we've seen New England's defense have dominant performances. Throughout the postseason, we've seen Seattle's offense also put up numbers. So I think that that's what it's going to come down to for me. I looked up something before I turn it back over to you. I looked up something just from Sam Darnold this postseason. In the 2 games that he's played against the 49ers and the Rams, he's gone 37 of 53. He has a 69.8 percentage, 470 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. You know what that tells me? He's been controlling the game. He hasn't wowed anyone, but he didn't have to. He didn't have to. He really just has a great defense behind him as well. So he just has to control the tempo of the game, not go out there and be a hero. He doesn't have to do the things that he would have had to do in Minnesota. He didn't have to do those things that he would have had to do, maybe a year ago. So it's just, for me, Sam Darnold has to go out there and just calm himself down. I think the first drive of the game is going to tell a lot, because if he can go out there, get in the rhythm, go out there, make plays with his legs as well, get outside of the pocket, find his trusted target in JSN, but also he has another reliable target in Cooper Kupp. You have good special teams. You have guys like Rashid Shaheed that can flip a field in a matter of seconds. So you literally don't have to go out there and set the world ablaze. You just have to control the game. If this was any time to be a game manager and just go out there and not lose the game, this would be that, because we've seen this New England defense affect quarterbacks like CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert. We've seen that. You just have to make sure that you're not going to be added to that list by giving them the ability to send pressure, hold on to the ball unnecessarily, get happy feet, and start throwing the ball all over the place. You just have to limit your mistakes, is what I'm saying. If he can do that, I give them both. If I had to say the split, I still give them the Seattle the slight edge because of the offensive performances, but it would be like 51-49. That's how even I think this game could be. But like I said, it's gonna be an interesting one for sure.
So no doubt Sam Darnold's been the better quarterback throughout the postseason. But I would say that he has more pressure on him to perform than Drake May does, because Drake May is at the early stage of his career. Sam Darnold, in some people's mind, is still trying to get rid of that whole can't play well in the big game label. And if he comes out and puts a dud out on the field in the Super Bowl, you know you're going to have those people like, see, told you, same old guy, doesn't get it done in the big game, despite the fact that he did it in the divisional and he did it in the NFC Championship. He's got to get it done in the Super Bowl too. For my prediction for this one, I think this is going to be a defensive battle. I think we're looking at about a 23-20, 2017 type of game. It honestly would not surprise me if this came down to the field goals. It wouldn't surprise me if it came down to the kicker having to make the kick. Ultimately, KB, I'm sticking with Seattle because I just think they got too much. Eamon Warren, he got banged up with that ankle. He's going to play in this game. If it's not broken, he's playing in the game. I also believe that Seattle has the edge in terms of the rushing attack with Kenneth Walker III. That's going to be a factor. And you brought up Cooper Kupp. It's not just that he's another weapon. He's a guy that's played and won in this game before too. So give me the Seattle Seahawks to win their second ever franchise Super Bowl on Sunday by a final score of 23-20.
Damn, you really just took the score. That's exactly the score I had too. Like, I do think it's going to be close. I don't think anyone's going to just pull away. I don't think it's going to be a runaway game by any measure. I think that this is going to be. You're going to have certain points throughout the game where you're going to see a back and forth, like 3 and outs. You might see that as a couple of points because we both know that this defense, like both defenses are athletic. They fly sideline to sideline. They can cover. They can rush the passer. They can do literally everything. These are two of the best defenses in the league. Now, like I said, the separator was the fact that, Seattle's offense is one of the best in the league. And New England has showed that they can be one of the best offenses in the league. I want to see, can they run the ball against that defense? I really want to see, can Travion Henderson get free and can he run the ball against that defense? Can Ramondre Stevenson also help out? And, can he be a factor in that game? But it's going to be more complimentary. It's going to start with Drake May. Can he make plays with his legs? Because we've seen in the postseason, he's had to make plays with his legs a lot just to be able to move the chains. Because for a defense, especially a great defense, you can't get behind the chains. If you can, get 4 to 5 yards a chunk, that's good enough to keep the chains moving and keep those drives going. And you're going to have to wear these defenses down. So sustaining long drives, that's going to be the name of the game to win the game. If you can sustain long drives and finish those long drives, that's going to be important as well because I think this game is going to be a defensive showdown. Can you finish those drives in the end zone as opposed to settling for a field goal? That's going to matter a lot.
All right, so that's going to wrap up another episode of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. We appreciate Lawrence coming on and joining us here on this second part and just giving us his thoughts on the Hall of Fame. Hopefully everybody enjoys the game. Hopefully we end up getting a great game. We need one after what we got last year. Hopefully it's just an enjoyable experience for everybody. Please be safe out there. Make smart decisions. And we'll do the same on this end too. But for X, he's KB. But for KB, I'm X. We're saying peace.
Peace.